Well, the working on the work framework really starts out with that same kind of a conception. It says our product is the work we give the kids. That's what schools produce. And we've got to invent work, design work, the response to the values, needs, and concerns and considerations of students. And there are categories of those things. For example, one of the things that kids care about in some fashion or another, and some more than others, is content and substance. And so one of the things you want to ask yourself is, to what extent, now if I've got the content as given, somebody says to me, you've got to teach history. Well, what do I do with a bunch of people who don't want any history? So now I've got to build some other quality or qualities into my product that will attract them to it even though they don't particularly like this one. And so the design challenge is, and what I've tried to lay out in those 10 design qualities, here's an area in which you think about content and substance. And here's some questions to raise about it. Think about novelty and variety, and here's some questions to think about. For example, novelty and variety is not really important the first day of school. If I were planning my first day's lessons and units of work, I would not worry too much about novelty and variety. But let me tell you, about the middle of October, you better start worrying about it. Because no matter how good it is, it eventually becomes routine. You had about all that good stuff you can stand. So the context changes, and different design qualities become amplified at different points in time. Seasonality is important. We don't think about the importance of season in terms of how we design work. Yet there's some fall work and there's some spring work. Teachers intuitively know that. They intuitively know that the Friday before the football game, they're going to have to do something different than they do on the first day of school. That engagement is easier to get the first day of school than it is to get the Friday before a football game in a high school. So how are you going to deal with that? And teachers kind of take it into account, but they don't take it into account quite often very consciously. And designing causes you to take these things into account consciously, not as a daily lesson plan, but you think about the rhythm of your work, and you think about how work goes down, you begin to take those things into account as you're designing the work. Now that means you have to come up with some design specifications. What are design specifications? In each one of those 10 areas, you need to specify what is the condition that must be met. For example, teachers sometimes intuitively, and I think wrongly quite often, when the kids aren't interested in the subject, try to make the subject more interesting. Maybe that's possible. Sometimes, without too much investment of energy, you can make the subject more interesting. But sometimes the subject is just damn boring. I mean, there's just no way to make memorizing the multiplication tables more interesting. There's things you've got to do. Knowing that locating the capitals, if you decide that it's important that a kid learn about place location of the capitals of the states, well, there's some games you can play and so forth, but there comes a limit to how much interest you can add to the work by enhancing the content. So maybe you say, well, the design specification is make it as interesting as possible, but don't spend too much time on it. But let me tell you what you can do. You can introduce a lot of novelty and variety, because one of the things that makes it uninteresting is humdrum. So can you provide a lot of choice in how they go about it? And you begin to say, increase the amount of choice at optimal level. That's a design specification. Provide as much novelty and variety as you can think of. Now once you get those design specifications written, you follow what I'm saying? Once you got that done, then you go back and say, now how do I do that? What ways, how could I provide choice? And that's why you need teams working on this stuff. How might we think about alternative? What are the alternatives that we could provide? What are the many ways that we could provide? And we start looking at established programs. And if you really get at this in a systematic way, it sounds like, gee, do I do that every day for every lesson? No, that's not what you're doing. You're designing units of work, and within that you're planning lessons. But you first have to have the unit of work designed, and then you start planning lessons of things to do within that. But the lesson is not what you're designing. You're designing the work. And then you say, what do the kids need to know in order to do that work? And you start planning the lessons. If you've got work that kids really want to do, then you become a guide to the instruction that they need, because every once in a while they need some instruction, and you may provide it or you may have a place to give it to them, but you first have to design the work. And the real work of the teacher is a designer and a guide to instruction, but we still want to be the instructor. And the fact of the matter is, instruction is increasingly going to be electronically based. But guiding is not going to be electronically based. And designing is not going to be electronically based. You can't, it takes too much imagination to design. It takes too much what if. And getting people to sit around and learning how to deal with what if statements. That's why you have design teams.